At the moment of death, medieval people were not thinking about peace. They were not thinking about rest or release. They were thinking about fear, sharp, heavy, suffocating fear shaped by belief, ritual, and centuries of stories about what waited beyond the final breath. Death was not an abstract idea. It was a precise moment that had been rehearsed in the mind for an entire lifetime. Death in the Middle Ages was not an ending. It was exposure. A stripping away of protection. A moment when the soul stood uncovered, unable to hide behind routine, excuses, or time. Medieval people believed that everything they had ever done gathered around them in that final instant. Every sin remembered them even if they tried to forget it. Memory became accusation. The greatest fear was not dying slowly or dying in pain. Pain belonged to the body, and the body would soon be left behind. What terrified medieval people was dying incorrectly. Dying in the wrong state. Dying without preparation. A bad death was worse than a painful one. They believed death demanded readiness. Confession. Repentance. Forgiveness. Spoken prayers. Final rites. To miss these was catastrophic. Sudden death was therefore one of the most feared outcomes imaginable. A man struck down in the street, crushed beneath a cart, stabbed in a tavern. A woman bleeding out in childbirth. A child taken overnight by fever. These deaths offered no warning, no time, no defense. The fear was not the shock. The fear was eternity beginning unfinished. Medieval people believed that at the final breath, the soul did not wander gently away. It was seized. Claimed. Taken. Angels and demons were thought to gather invisibly at the bedside, contesting ownership of what was leaving the body. The room itself became a battlefield. Even if the dying person saw nothing, they believed something was happening just beyond sight, something listening to their last words, weighing their last thoughts. The dying feared deception above all. They were taught throughout life that the devil would not appear as a monster at the end. He would appear as comfort, as warmth, as light, as relief from pain. A dying person who felt sudden peace was taught to resist it. That calm could be false. The devil's final victory was not terror, but ease, making damnation feel like rest. Fear intensified as the body weakened. The dying were taught that the final thoughts mattered more than years of living. A single moment of despair could undo decades of obedience. A final thought of anger, fear, doubt, or bitterness could outweigh a lifetime of faith. Death compressed existence into seconds, and those seconds carried infinite weight. Hell was not symbolic or distant. Medieval people imagined it vividly, physically, relentlessly. It was heat without destruction, pain without death, screaming without silence. Sermons described bodies burned, crushed, torn apart, restored, and punished again. Paintings filled churches with images of demons pulling souls apart. Hell was endless sensation without relief. To fear hell was to fear being trapped forever inside suffering. People were encouraged to imagine hell while alive so fear would guide behavior. They were meant to see themselves there. To feel terror in advance. To prepare the soul. But rehearsal did not remove fear. It sharpened it. At death, those images returned with unbearable clarity. Even those who believed they might avoid hell feared purgatory deeply. Purgatory was not gentle waiting. It was cleansing through pain. Fire that purified through suffering. Time there was unknown. Days, years, centuries, perhaps longer. Medieval people feared dying with too much impurity remaining. Without enough prayers promised. Without enough masses paid for. Without enough good deeds remembered. Without help from the living, suffering continued after death. The dying feared abandonment. To die alone was terrifying. A dying person wanted priests, family, neighbors, not for comfort, but protection. Spoken prayers were believed to shield the soul. Words mattered. Silence was dangerous. In silence, demons could approach unchallenged. To die without witnesses meant facing judgment without defense. Death was watched closely by the living. Every movement of the body was interpreted. Struggling meant resistance. Gasping meant conflict. Screaming suggested the soul was being pulled away violently. A calm death was taken as a sign of divine favor. A violent one frightened everyone present. The living judged the dead even before burial. The body itself became a source of terror. Medieval people believed body and soul were inseparable in life. Separation at death was violent and unnatural. The soul was torn away. Decay horrified them. Being eaten by worms, collapsing into earth, losing human shape, this was not poetic. It was disturbing. The loss of form felt like the loss of self. Resurrection mattered deeply. At the end of time, the body was meant to rise again. What if it was destroyed? What if it was burned, scattered, lost at sea? Improper handling of the body threatened identity itself. Burial rituals were protection, not tradition. Improper burial was feared almost as much as hell. A body buried outside consecrated ground risked unrest. Souls without rights were believed to wander, trapped between worlds. Ghosts were not stories. They were warnings. They existed because something had gone wrong at death. People feared unfinished business. Debts unpaid. Oaths broken. Wrongs uncorrected. Medieval belief held that unresolved matters could bind the soul to the world. The dead returned because they could not rest. To die with obligations unfulfilled was dangerous. Execution carried a unique terror. The condemned feared not only pain, but failure. A curse shouted in agony. Hatred toward executioners. Panic overwhelming faith. Any of this could damn the soul. Executions were public so the crowd could witness not just death, but judgment in real time. Plague deaths were among the most horrifying. People died rapidly, violently, without priests, without ritual. Preparation collapsed under mass death. Many believed plague was divine punishment. To die during it felt like confirmation of guilt. Bodies were buried hurriedly, sometimes without names, without prayers. Fear multiplied even after death. Children were taught to fear death early. Churches surrounded them with images of demons, judgment, fire. Death was not escape from discipline. It was discipline made eternal. Fear entered before understanding. Women feared death in childbirth intensely. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous moments of medieval life. Death could arrive suddenly, without warning. Many women confessed before labor began. Some asked priests to wait nearby. Survival mattered, but readiness mattered more. Even monks feared death. Knowledge increased responsibility. A sinful monk risked deeper condemnation. Devotion did not erase fear. It intensified it. Sleep itself was linked to death. Death was called eternal sleep. Each night felt like rehearsal. Falling asleep and not waking was real. Many prayed before sleep as if preparing to die. The fear of death shaped medieval life completely. People memorized prayers for the final moment. They practiced dying well. They planned funerals years ahead. They donated money to shorten suffering after death. Life itself became preparation. At the final moment, fear became absolute. Breath slowed. Pain sharpened. The world narrowed. Belief took full control. The dying believed judgment had already begun. Regrets flooded in. Every sin returned at once. There was no distraction. No future. Only consequence. Medieval people did not fear death as mystery. They feared it as exposure. As judgment. As the moment when nothing could be hidden. The final breath was not release. It was the opening of the verdict. And once it was spoken, there was no appeal.